Okay? We're going to recap from the Mishnah. So if you're following in the art scroll, it's 8A2, okay, from the Mishnah. En ben zav, haroesh iyot leroesh shalosh. There's no difference between the person who sees two sights, two experiences of emission for the zav, more than a person who sees three times. Ela korban. The only difference is the korban, and when a person has seen two or seen three, everything is exactly the same. A two guy is tameh, no korban. A three guy is tameh with the korban. The Gemara deduces, as we do every time, from the fact that you said en ben, it must be that you're telling me that there's something about them which is similar. If you're telling me that they're indistinguishable, so okay, in what way are they synonymous? In what way are they the same? When it comes to the tum'ah that is transmitted through lying on his bed or on his couch, or to sitting on the chair, or sfirat shiva, or to counting the 7 days of tum'ah, both of them require shiva, and both of them have tumat mishkav and moshav. Minan imili. How do we know this? The Tanu Rabbanan, we learned this from the fact that the Chachamim explained. Rabbi Simai Omer, Mana Katuv Shtayim Ukiraot Tameh. The Torah said the word Zav 2 times in the pasuk, and then right afterwards it said the word Tameh. Shalosh Ukiraot Tameh. And also, what else? It had Zav 3 times in the pasuk, and it also called him Tameh. Let's just look for 1 second at the 2 pesukim. The 2 pesukim are, it's brought down, if you want to see the pasuk, in the notes at the bottom. Ish ki zav mipsaro zovo tamehu. Zav and zovo, it says it twice, and then after 2 times of mentioning the word zav, it already calls him a tameh. The next pasuk, right afterwards in the parasha, it says v'zot tiyeh tumato, and this will be his tum'ah, bizovo 1, rar besaro et zovo 2, o hechtim besaro mizovo, from his flow, tumatohu. You see that the Torah said the word zav 3 times and then followed it up with the suffix of his impurity, illustrating that a person is tameh after 2 and a person is tameh after 3. So therefore, what difference could there possibly be if you're telling me 2 equals tameh and you're telling me 3 equals tameh, other than the fact that now there's an additional level, which is the korban. The Gemara says, "Ve'emar." How do you know that the extra thing comes to tell you a korban? Ve'emar shtaim letumah v'lo lekorban. 2 gives you tumah but no korban. Same as what we think now. But 3 shalosh lekorban v'lo letumah. 3 is going to come to give you a korban but not tumah. You will not be the strict level of a tumah for your zav. The Gemara says, "What are you talking about? Amret, you want to tell me? Ad shelo ra'ah shalosh, ra'ah shtayim. Until you saw 3, you already saw 2. If you saw 2 already, in 2 you became tameh for 7 days. Why would you lose your tum'ah for seeing an extra element of the thing that made you tameh in the first place? It makes no sense." But we explained last week that every hava amina of the Gemara also needs to be justified. We need to understand, why could the Gemara even propose this? It's preposterous. We don't propose preposterous things. So we don't propose preposterous propositions. So therefore, if we want to be able to do that, my friends, we have to have a reason. What's the reason? So we gave 2 examples where more is actually less. And the first example that we gave was the example of Mitzorah, where the guy actually has more of his body covered in the white blemish, that a smaller amount made him tameh and a larger amount made him pure. So if he experienced a small amount on the way to a larger amount, the larger amount now is not going to make him impure. It just illustrates that it's not what we thought it was. Okay? Now you have this, by the way, even in the medical field. Let's say, as an example, a person has a certain rash. They'll classify it as a certain rash. If the rash spreads on the whole body, they'll say, no, it can't be that rash. We've never had a case of that rash that spreads to a person's head. So the fact that it's on his head tells me that's not what I thought it was on his arm. Okay? So let's move on. So the Gemara asks it, but the Gemara rejects it. We don't have a reason to say that here more would not be, we don't have a reason to say that more would be less. But so let's go the other way. Maybe at 2, the person has an obligation to bring a korban. But not the tumah. It does not mean that it's not tum'ah. How do you know that there was never an opinion, there was never a hava amina, that he would bring at 2 a korban but not be tameh at all? You understand what the Gemara just did?
It said 2 is not tameh. He's trying to say 2 is not tameh.
2 is not tameh, but it brings a korban. 3 is tameh and a korban. So it's upscaling, right? That's what the Gemara is going to try and propose. But there was never a point in time where we thought that the person was not going to be tameh with the korban, the 2. Also, previously in the Gemara, in the Hava Amina, when the Gemara said 2 is tameh with no korban, 3 is a korban with no tumah, we never meant no tumah. We just meant not the strictest level of tumah.
But 2 is
Why?
the strictest level of tumah?
2, in the original proposition of the Gemara, we said 2 is strictest level of tumah, no korban.
Okay.
3, not the strictest level of tumah, but with a korban.
So what comes first?
What do you mean? You see 2 first.
No, not 2 or 3.
The strict, not strict.
The korban or the not tameh?
The korban comes later because you have to wait
The
for it.
stringent, the strictest means like your seat and your couch.
Mishkav,
Your
Moshav,
touch.
right? Those higher levels of tumah that apply only by a zav, where I'm not touching the object, but I sat down on it, everything underneath it is tameh. So all these extra strict levels of zav, right? We don't have it in this case. Why is the Gemara sure that when it says no tumah, why is it that can't be that it means that there's no tumah at all? We just mean it doesn't have the strictest level of tumah. You know why it can't be that there's no tumah at all? Because the pasuk says zav zav tameh, zav 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 tameh. But in either case, it says tameh. So it has to be that you're tameh. The only question is, are we either going to take off the highest level of tumah after you've seen a third time, or do you start off with a small level of tumah and work towards a higher level?
Why you're not allowed to bring a korban if you're the highest level of tumah?
No, you could bring it. The Gemara is just trying to figure out, would we say that they're the same with regards to the strict level of tumah? Would we assume that? Or would we not assume that? That's the question. And the Gemara is trying to work with all the options. All I'm pointing out is that there is 0 option that at 2 you have no tumah, and there's 0 option that at 3 you have no tumah. All we could say is that you're at 2 or 3 with a lower level, with a higher level, with a little with tumah, with a korban, tumah without a korban. But to say that there's no tumah, that's against the pasuk. Okay, I just wanted to establish the baseline here before we move.
But wouldn't the difference maker that we've learned in the past between the 2 and the 3, in the 3 that has the korban, before we said 2 with no korban, so that does entail that it is a little more stricter.
So we're entertaining different possibilities. We haven't come to a conclusion yet. Okay, so let's continue. The Gemara says lo sal kadaitach. So if you want to say 2 with the korban, but not with the strict level of tumah, and 3 af le tumah, so 3 has higher level tumah, higher level korban. By the way, I mean that kind of makes sense to me, right? 2 is less seeing, less tumah, still a korban. 3 more tumah and a korban. I could see that.
Unless 3 means something else.
But I could see that, right? Gemara says lo sal kadaitach. No, I understand that makes sense to you in terms of more or less, but lo sal kadaitach. You can't entertain this. Why? The Tanya, the Braita teaches us that the Kohen will bring kapara to the guy from who had the zav, and it says v'chiper alav hakohen lifnei Hashem mizovo, from his emission. Anytime you have the word mi, from, it means from but not all. Okay? Miktzat zavin mevi'in korban. Umiktzat zavin en mevi'in korban. So it's telling me, from a person who has zav, the Kohen brings a korban, indicating not all. By the way, this limud we have in a million places. That when we have the word mi, it doesn't mean all, it means some. Okay? We've actually had a couple already previously in Masechet Ta'anit, yes, of where we have a mi, where it doesn't mean mi kol velo kol. All right? We also have we had just now, but with Mordechai, it says that Mordechai was ratzui l'rov echav, right? And the Gemara learns l'rov echav, not to everybody. So when we see that the pasuk is saying something, a lot of times it's trying to tell you some but not all, and that's why we're minimizing. Now, in the case of Mordechai, obviously it says it more explicitly, but me but not all is a very common limud. So file that away in the back of your head. Okay. Miktzat tzavim mevi'in korban, miktzat tzavim em mevi'in korban. HaKetzad, how could it be? So which one is going to bring and which one's not going to bring? Ra'ash shalosh mevi, shtaim eno mevi. The Braita says if he sees 3 times, that's when he brings a korban. 2, he does not. Okay? So therefore, you can't say what we just said. 2 is smaller tuma korban, 3 larger tuma korban. Because now the Braita says explicitly that 2 no korban, 3 korban. The Gemara continues, or maybe, Ela ra'a bet mevi ra'a shalosh eno mevi. How do you know? Maybe if you saw 2 you bring, and if you saw 3 you don't bring. Amrit ad shelo ra'a shalosh ra'a shtaim. What are you talking about? Once the guy saw 2, already it illustrated that he had a certain chiyuv and he had a certain tum'ah. Now that he saw 3, it's going to be less than that? Can't be. The Braita assumes that in this case we don't have this experience of more is actually less, and therefore it doesn't make sense that 2 would bring and 3 would not. And if the pasuk explicitly says there's a zav that brings and a zav that doesn't, I'm going to say that the one that's going to bring is going to be the more, and the one that's not going to bring is going to be the less. The Gemara says, "V'itzrich," and we needed this opinion of Rabbi Simai. Rabbi Simai brought the pasuk of 2 and 3, if you remember, right? Shtayim l'tumah v'shalosh l'korban. Why do we need the Rabbi Simai v'itzrich mizovo? We need both of these expressions. One is mizovo, right? The Gemara is really asking now, if you tell me mizovo means that only some zavs have a korban, I probably could have worked out by myself that it was 3 and not 2. That's what anyone at this table would have thought, right? If that's the case, why did I need the pasuk to tell you zav, 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 zav? I could have figured out there's a certain amount of zavs. Maybe the guy who brings a korban is the guy who sees more. I could have worked that out myself. The Gemara says, no, we need both. Why? To eat Rabbi Simai, if I came from Rabbi Simai, have amina, I could have thought, ki kushan. I would have thought like the question, which means that the 2 and the 3 was only a difference maker with regards to the level of the tum'ah, not with regards to the korban. Kamash malan mizovo. The pasuk says mizovo, and where is mizovo stated? The kohen will bring forgiveness for the zav mizovo from. So the Torah told you the mi'ut in the korban to illustrate that zav zav and zav 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 zov zovo zavo. The 3 times the difference between them is going to be in whether or not you bring a korban. So that's why we could not have gone away with just Rabbi Simai. I would have thought that the 2 versus 3 is only a difference for Tum'ah. Therefore, the Torah says, Mizovo, it brings you a limitation in the Korban in order to be able to express that there's a difference between 2 and 3 in Korban level. Therefore, you needed at least Rabbi Simai and Kamash Malay Mizovo. And if it was the other way around, so let's flip it. Let's say it only would have said Mizovo, which means that in the Korban it says some Zavs have a Korban. I probably could have worked out, like I said earlier, that more Zavs, more Zav Re'iyaz, more seeing, is going to obligate me in a Korban. And the one that doesn't bring Korban is the guy who sees less. The Gemara says, Lo Yadana Kamari'iyot. I wouldn't have known. The same way you could have said 2 and 3, maybe it's 3 and 4, maybe it's 4 and 5, maybe it's 500 and 501, maybe it's 101, 26, 36, 18, 72. I don't know. Right. So therefore, because it's just more seeings and less seeings. So I would not have known how many is no korban and how many is the korban, where that cutoff was. So therefore, we needed both pisukim to operate in tandem. Are we clear now where we stand? Yes.
Yeah. Was there ever a case where it was only 2 zavs, someone had only 2 zavs, and they never had the third, so they don't?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Happened all the time. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you had the tumah, but you did not have the korban. Okay, but again, I want everyone to these gemarot, especially when they're not what you're dealing with. It's like you're a lawyer and you walked in the middle of a court case, but someone else's court case, and they're like, "Go." You're like reading the notes. You're like, "What the heck is going on?"
It doesn't apply to you.
It not just doesn't apply. We're not learning the masechet of tumah v'tahara. We haven't had introductions to the concepts, to korban, to impurity, to any of these things. So we're kind of being blindsided. All of the end bands are like this. So it's a little bit. I want to make sure everyone's with it. Everyone got us so far? Yes. Okay. Let's carry on. So the Gemara says, and now that you told me mizovo lidrasha from, right? That's coming. V'chiyitar hazav mizovo. My darshat be. If you just told me that when it says mizovo, it's coming to tell me some zav have, some zavs do not. So in the later pasuk it says v'chiyitar hazav mizovo, when he becomes pure, and it uses that same word. If you're telling me that when it uses that word, it's coming to teach me a lesson of some zavs have this, whatever we're talking about, and some zavs do not, what is that mizovo teaching me? Okay? The Gemara says, Hahu mebayele lekedetanya. That other zav, which talks about the tahara, the purity or purification of zav, is coming to teach you a different lesson. Lekedetanya, like it says in the Braita, v'chiyitar zav, when the zav will become tahor, lekishiyifsok mizovo. What does it mean that v'chiyitar hazav, that when the zav will become pure? And it said mizovo, from. It's coming to tell you that when can a person start counting clean days? Clean days for the 7 clean days, only once the person has stopped the flow. Just like Nida as an example. Let's say a person has to count the 5 days and the 7 days, okay? So you have to count that. But when does a person start counting those days? You can't start counting when the person's still in the middle of the flow. You have to first stop. But if without the mizovo, I could have thought, okay, I'll count from the flow. It's still going, but you know what? By the time I get to the end of the 7, I'll be good.
They're telling you how long it'll last, theoretically.
Sorry?
Saying
you might think it's telling you how long it'll last. Or worst case scenario, how long it will last. So when the pasuk tells you that the zav will count 7 days, mizovo, from his zav, it's telling you that not every zav will be able to count on the same day. So it's giving you again that limitation in the purification process that he needs to stop seeing before you could count.
And the only way of purification was the mikveh?
Sorry?
The only way to purify was the mikveh? Was there any other way to purify?
No, you need the mikveh and the korban. Okay? So v'chi zav, when the zav will become tahor, the yifsok mizovo. It only starts when he's tahor. That's when he can count. Mizovo. So what does the word mizovo add over there when it comes to the tahara? It's coming to tell you not v'lo mizovo v'nig'o, and from his nega. Where's the word nega? The word nega is borrowed from tzarat. What if hazit, this guy zav, it's not his lucky day? Hada has zav and tzarat at the same time.
It's a rough one.
She biflej. Right? That's a guy you want to say mazal tov to, right? They say if he didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have luck at all. My friends, so what do we do with this guy, right? Lo mizovo v'nig'o. The answer is, if he has to stop counting, he is allowed to stop as soon as the flow stops. Because even though he still has tzarat, and tzarat's not gone away, that's a separate item. So the pasuk is telling you, and why would I have thought that? Can anyone figure out? Let's say the guy has zav and tzarat. So the halacha is, if he wants to count for the zav, he has to wait till the end of zav. So now the guy stopped having his zav flow, but he's still a mitzorah. So what would the hava amina be? That to count for zav, I have to wait to be free of tzarat.
All the stuff that he touches.
Why would I have thought that? No, I'm asking. The pasuk is telling you, mizovo, when do you start counting? When you're free of zovo, from your zav. But why would I have thought, and not meet from the tzarat? Why would I have thought that he needs to wait until he's free of tzarat to start counting for zav? I'll give you an example. I like taking this out of the realm of what we're dealing with into something more practical. Yeah. Let's say a person has a headache, okay, and a throbbing in their toe. The doctor says you're taking Tylenol for the headache and you're taking Advil for your toe. Now you got to count, however long you got to count from the last time you took a painkiller from your head. Okay? So I'm counting for the Tylenol from my head, right? Do I have to count how many hours since the last Tylenol I took from my head or since the last Advil I took from my toe? One has nothing to do with the other. Zero. In fact, that's what they tell you to do for pain management. To cycle between, to alternate those two things if a person needs to take more, because the body can't handle more of one or the other. They're two separate things. They happen to be happening simultaneously. So too over here. A guy is a mitzorah and he's a zav. The pasuk is coming to tell you, you have to wait till the end of your mazav flow in order to count the 7 days. But if you still have tzarat, no, you don't have to wait till the end of tzarat to keep counting for the zav. Why would I have thought that? Jonah, I heard you say something even though it was muted. But it's a different tumah. Yeah, they're different sources of tumah. You're partially right. I was just pushing you.
You can't make a
I was pushing you for the answer. The korban is only going to be later anyway. But that's a good answer. Since at the end of 7 you have to bring korban, how do I know that by the end of 7 I'll be done with the tzara to bring the korban? I like that. But that's not what I'm looking for. You almost said it, Jonah. Jonah said, "What do you mean? I'm still tameh from the other tumah, but so I'm not. I'm not out of tumah." He said. So I said it's a different type of tameh. So therefore, why would I think I have to count for the other tameh? You guys are missing. Remember, we're learning this in the pasuk. Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to go in a mikveh if you're still tameh. No?
I like it. So that's similar to raise. Because the mikveh only happens after you finish counting. What are we missing? Remember, where are we drawing this from? What does the pasuk say?
Are we talking 2 or 3?
That's not the part of this conversation. It's whichever it is, but the Gemara is saying that whenever that's finished, could you count if you're still tameh tzarat, if you're not tameh zav? Because the pasuk says, v'chiyitar hazav. It says, it doesn't say when the zav is not tameh. It says when the zav is pure.
Then he counts.
I'm not pure. Even if I'm not tameh zav anymore, could you use the word tahor for a guy who's tameh? No. Can't. So the Gemara, the Hava Amina would have been that you have to wait until you're pure from both. Sorry?
He specifies and says zav.
Even still, the zav is a descriptive terminology we're talking about. So the zav guy, when he's tahor, then he counts. He's not tahor.
Tameh is tameh. Doesn't matter where it comes from.
Exactly. So again, I can understand that you tell me that there's no logic to need to force me to wait for my zav counting, for my tzarat counting. But when the Torah says v'chi yithar zav, that when the zav will be pure, he can count. I'm not pure, even if it's from something else. On that, the pasuk says specifically, like Ray said, v'chi yithar hazav mizovo. When the zav, descriptive terminology, I'm talking about that guy, when he's tahor from his zov, from his flow, not from everything.
That's why it says me.
Then he counts.
Mizovo, exactly. That's why it's giving me that limitation to tell me mizovo from his flow. V'lo minigo. By the way, I just want to tell you, the fact that you guys are traveling with me on this would have been unthinkable even a month and a half, 2 months ago. Just the ability to stay with a back, forth, is just unbelievable. I'm super proud.
We are behind him.
It's
Really taking the meat to the next level.
There's no me in mizovo. Okay, fine. So anyone? Let's clarify. Anyone else? So ask me a question. What are we unclear about?
No, I'm clear now.
Yeah, you good with me?
So to relate it to a medical term, as long as your body is still sick, regardless of where it's from, you're still sick, you're not tahor, therefore the clock doesn't...
That's the Hava Amina. I would have thought that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So in other words, we're looking at it almost like, let's say as an example, when someone's too weak to take a medication,
Right.
Who cares why I'm weak, if I'm weak because of this, or if I'm weak because of that? My body can't handle it, I'm just weak. So the Pasuk says, V'chiyithar. So since it says that it's tahara that's needed, so I don't care if I'm tameh for this or tameh for that, I'm not tahor. If it says tameh, I would have looked at it differently. On that, the pasuk says that which you just thought, I'm taking that away, and actually, I'm going to say like what you thought and what you didn't think in the beginning, which is that you count when you're finished with zav, even if you're currently tameh for mitzorah. We learned that from the word mizovo.
Is it fair to say, based upon your analogy, my headache is cured, but my foot still hurts? Right? After the
mizovo,
Yeah.
after the learning of the mizovo,
Yeah.
at that point I would say my headache is done. Right, I counted the hours
Counted the
from the
seven
Tylenol,
days, but the toe still has an
and the toe is still infected.
Right. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Got it right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Familiar with that.
Ray's ketone. Ray has the wildest ketone pasim energy. It just he yanks it out. He's like that magician and then it's a rose, and then it's a dove, and then it's like okay, fine. V'safar. The pasuk says v'safar.
Anyway, it slows it down, you know.
Mizovo v'safar. He counts from at the end of his full. Limed al azav. This comes to teach you limed al zav bal sheteriyot, that when a zav sees 2 emissions, like we've said already before, shetaun sfirat shiva, that he needs to count 7 days. Okay. So the last thing that we learned in the Braita is that a 2 seeing Zav needs to have Sfirat Sheva, that he needs to count 7 clean days in order to get Tahor. And that's like the first line of the Gemara. After the Mishnah said that 2 and 3 are both equal. They both require a counting of 7 days. The Gemara says, the Halodinu, really? You just told me that you need V'safar, Mizovo V'safar, that you needed to count, that we needed a pasuk to tell me that a 2 seeing Zav requires counting of 7 days. V'alodinu, it's obvious. Im mitameh mishkav u'moshav lo yeh ta'un sfirat shiva. This tum'ah, the tum'ah of a Zav, has a stringency that other tum'ahs do not have. So let's say I have tum'at ochlin, which means that food that was not pure, I touched or ate that food, I become tameh. At that point, I can't make something impure just by sitting on it or by lying on that couch and things underneath it as well. This is a very high level of tum'ah. So if I have superpower tum'ah levels, right, isn't it obvious just from that fact alone that I'd be obligated in 7 days in counting 7 clean days, right? So why would I need a special pasuk to tell me that you have to count 7 clean days?
Food is the highest stringency?
No, lowest.
Lowest.
Tumat ochlin is lowest.
It's internal?
Even though it's internal. Yeah. Highest one is avi avot tum'ah, is a dead body. So a person touches dead body, o bechalal cherev, that, and again, that doesn't have a purity. Today, every single one of us is impure. I always say if Mashiach would come right now, let's say Mashiach would come right now. Technically, we would not. By the way, I would get away. Hadda's got only a donkey.
Yeah. Scooter's way faster.
Exactly. Scooter's way faster than a donkey. But I'm sure he has it's like souped up. You know, I mean, imagine Elon Musk has outfitted that white donkey with some jet thrusters, baby. All right? But either way, in the time of Mashiach would come right now. How far away are we from Pesach?
Less than a day, less than a week. 3
Less
days.
than a week. All of us would be unable to bring the Korban Pesach. Even Mashiach came right now. Wow. And we think, being the Bet HaMikdash, perfect, bringing the Korban. Nope. We wouldn't. Because every one of us is Tameh Met. That's wild. Even if you don't know. So we wouldn't be able to bring the Korban Pesach.
That's a mind bender.
Only way is Para Aduma. You need the Para Aduma to spray on the guy, but it needs 7 days.
Oh, you need 7 days.
Still need
7 days.
7 days. That's
So if we're not...
The fact that Mashiach can come right now?
Excellent question. No, it doesn't. Because it would just mean that we wouldn't be able to bring the Korban Pesach.
But then
So when would we bring Korban Pesach? If you miss Korban Pesach,
Pesach
Sheni, right? We bring it in Iyar. Except for the fact that there's another law in Korban Pesach that if the entire congregation is Tameh, Tum'ah is Hutra B'tzibur. If everyone's Tameh, you would be allowed to bring the Korban Pesach. There's different laws about how you bring a Korban Pesach where everyone brings it in Tum'ah. But we say there's a line called Tum'ah Hutra B'tzibur. When everyone's Tameh, then no, it's not no one's Tameh, but no one's Tameh. Exactly.
Like the entire body.
Hey! Whoop! There we go. Excellent. Yes. So brought it full circle. So we would still be able to bring the Korban Pesach in its time if Mashiach came now. Okay. So the Gemara's question is at this stage we've now we're on the 8b1. Okay. If the Gemara is telling me that I don't need a source, so why did the Braita tell me? Right. We just ended off. The Braita says, Lo yetaun sfirat shiva. So why did you tell me you needed a source to teach me that a 2 seeing Zav needs to count 7 days? Just the fact that its Tumah is so high would already have told me that law. The Gemara answers, you could not have understood it from logic without the pasuk. Shomeret yom keneged yom tochiach. Okay. Now this needs a little bit of a background over here. Let's look at Rashi. You see Rashi on the top line? Haro'eh yom echad or shnaim. Someone sees 1 day or 2 days. Betoch achad asar yom. Sheben nida lenida. A person sees 1 or 2 days between nida sightings. Moneh yom echad v'tovelet bo bayom tochiach. The Gemara has a a case in Nida where a person will see 2 times spread out over this 11-day period. Okay? Achad asar yom. And even though the person is seeing 2 times, and even though there's a case to be made that the person would have to wait 7, what do we say about that person? There's a halakha that they tovel bo bayom. They dip on that day. So I found you a case of 2 sightings where the person does not have to wait 7 days. What the intricate nature is of going into that is going to take too long. I don't want to go there, okay? But there's a case of Nidah where there's 2 sightings in 11 days where the person does not, again, bring the obligation of counting 7. So I found you a case of 2 sightings where the person would normally count 7, and here they don't have to count 7. So therefore, maybe I could have used that as a logical counterpoint and knocked out your obviously statement, and therefore the pasuk has to come to tell it to you explicitly. That in that case also, Tumat Nida is also so strict that it's mitamem mishkav and moshav, ve'eno to'enet tzvirat shiva, and in that case it doesn't need to count 7. Ve'af ata al titama al zeh. Also, don't ask on this. Al titama al zeh. Don't be surprised on the zav. It might not need 7. On that, the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk had to tell you, mizovo v'safar, miktzat zovo v'safar. When it says, when he counts from his zov, miktzat zovo, from a portion of, from, like we said, it's partial, when it's only 2. It's not the full 3. So mizovo, even though it's only one of the zavs, still safar, he still has to count 7 days from the 2. Amar le Rav Papa le Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya, Maishnaha mizovo. What's the difference? We have a mizovo over here, that the mizovo over here, de marbi bezav bashteriyot, one of your froms removed, and one of your froms added. Let's go back. Remember, what was the... So just now, we said mizovo v'safar comes to tell you that a 2 person, even if he's 2, he's one of the zavs, he still has to count. But he's the lower of the zav, meaning that that's a statement that includes rather than excludes.
And the other one was excluded.
The first mizovo, what was our first mizovo? That he's also he also has to bring the korban. So the first mizovo said only 3 from the zav brings a korban, not all the zav. The second one, mizovo, from the zav he counts, which means that even the 2 has to count. So one of them is adding and one of them is taking away. Rav Papa asks, how do you do that? It's not consistent. The first one is marbi bezav bashteriot. Umayshnaha mizovo, and why is this mizovo dimimaet bezav bashteriot? It's excluding it. Amar le Abaye said to Rav Papa, isal kedaitach haile meutehu de'ata. So let's go on the one that just included, which is this pasuk mizovo v'safar, which means that from the 2 zavs, 2 and 3, v'safar, he has to count. So we use this to add. Says Abaye, if you wanted this limeutehu de'ata to exclude, lishtok kiramine, the pasuk could have just kept its mouth shut, and all it would need to say is v'safar. And since it didn't tell you which kind of zav, you would apply the word v'safar to everything. So a non-mizovo would have told you what? Everybody had to count. On the other hand, the other one, we're limiting 2 and not 3 for korban. Therefore, it had to say mizovo. Right? Lishto kramine, the pasuk. So that's how I knew that this mizovo was actually including and not excluding. V'chitema atya midina. And if you're going to argue, so then if you're not going to say mizovo, right, then I would have learned out shomeret yom kineged yom tochiach. When we were learning about the logical exegesis, right, what did we say? That I would have learned from Nida that there's a case of citing, right, of tum'ah that's super strict, that doesn't need to count 7, right? So what would I have learned if it would not have said mizovo?
7 days.
I would have learned that you don't need to count 7 from Nida in that case that we mentioned earlier. Shomeret yom kineged yom tochiach. Now, are you understanding this? So the pasuk Abaye says, if I would not have had mizovo, what would I have learned? V'safar. I would have said it's included. But then you would ask me back, v'chitema, if you answer, atya medina, I would learn it out of logic. So therefore I don't need it at all. The safar would not have told me that. Shomer yom kineged yom tochiach. I would have understood from shomer yom kineged yom that the law, that these two ideas of strictness of tumah does not tell you how long you have to wait. Last question before we end this period of, sorry for using that word, before we end, and if you want to tell us that this is needed, this expression of mizovo is needed, mizovo v'lo minigo, it's coming to tell me that it's only if a person has simultaneously zav and tzarat, that it's coming to tell me this law, just like in the other place where you learn mizovo. So therefore it's not extra. And if that's the case, maybe it's not limiting, maybe it's adding. Imken, lichtov kra, let the pasuk say, v'chi yithar hazav v'lishtok. All the pasuk had to say is v'chi yithar, and when the zav is tahor, and then keep its mouth shut. Why? Because if it would have said chi yithar, what would I have understood? I would have understood that it's you'd have to wait until the end, including his weight for being emitzorah. Mizovo lamali. 1 second, let's just finish the last line. Mizovo lamali. Why do I need the word mizovo? Limed azav b'ashteriyot shetaun sfirat shiva. I learned from here, from this extra pasuk of mizovo, it's coming to tell me that when I have a zav that has 2 re'iyot, 2 seeings, ta'un sfirat shiva, that still he needs to wait 7 days. So that what Rav Papa's question brought out of Abaye was not just the answer between these 2 points, but it brought out every if-then statement that we could have had. What happened if it would not have said mizovo? What happened if it would have added mizovo? What happened if I would have only had the learning point from nida? What happens if I now added mizovo to shtei re'iyot? So where are we at the end of all of these learnings? Let's review, and I want to make this clear. And it should be absolutely clear where we land. En ben, there's no difference between 2 and 3 sightings. Ela, what did the Mishnah say? En ben, ela, korban. Only a korban. The Gemara tried to make other differentiations between the strictness of the tumah. The Gemara shot that down. The Gemara tried to make another distinction that maybe the second one brings a korban and not the third. The Gemara shot that down. So where did we land? We landed in a place that a 2 has the strict laws of tumah. A 3 has the strict laws of tumah. A 2 counts 7 days, and a 3 counts 7 days. A 2. The only difference is in the korban. The other lesson that we learned along the way, while we were ascertaining what mizovo teaches you, is a lesson with regards to a case where a person has zav and tzarat at the same time, that the halacha is that to count for zav, they only wait for the zav. They do not wait for the tzarat to be able to count 7, because we learned that from mizovo. That's where we landed up. With all the tennis volleying back and forth, what we came out with was the laws of the Mishnah in the first place. So the Gemara basically gave us the entire structural backdrop of how the Mishnah arrived at this point, which is that there's no difference 2 and 3 in strictness of Tumah. There's no difference 2 and 3 with regards to waiting 7, right? The only difference between 2 and 3 is in bringing the Korban. And in both cases, you don't have to wait to be pure from Tzarat in order to count for your Zav.
So
yeah.
if somebody has 3 sightings and
Yeah.
they have Tzarat, and they count the clean days of the Zav, right? They could bring a Korban while they're still Tameh from the Tzarat?
Excellent question. Second question, you guys asked 2 questions there. One question was, could you bring the Korban? Other question is, could you go to the mikveh? Because, was that you who asked that? Who said that? You'd be going to the mikveh while you're impure. Is that Jonah?
Yeah.
Right? When you go to the mikveh, there's a famous law that says, Tovel v'sheretz biado. Right. It's like you're dipping, but at the same time you have tumah in your hands. Right? So can the person become clean at that point. So I want to just introduce a concept. There's a concept called Tvul Yom, right? Where a person has to wait so that Tumah is ended, but they need to wait until nightfall in order to be able to start the Tahara process. So I'm already Tahor, but there's a period of time I'll need to wait for another reason in order to actually go to the mikveh. So my Tum'ah from Zav will cease. Okay?
You have a delay.
That's gone. I do not yet have, I'm not Tameh, but I'm also not Tahor. Okay? So I don't have the clearance. But we find that example, it's called the case of a Tvul Yom. What do we say about that? There's halachot with regards to korbanot for a Tvul Yom, that if someone's not pure, you can't bring korban on their behalf. When the person is Tvul Yom, they're just on the clock now. They just need to wait their hours. You could do the korban, but you can't eat it until you dip. So there's a change in the person's status, but it's not a full change in the status.
So you can bring the korban and not eat it.
So again, I don't want to get into the intricacies of the laws because there's a lot of differences in how the person goes to the mikveh and how the person brings the korban. But I just wanted to bring you the example of Tvul Yom to illustrate that I could count and be finished with my counting, right, and still not have gone to the mikveh. By the way, fascinating because we have the exact scenario by Nidah. What happens if a woman is finished her 7 days but does not have a mikveh? She's clean, but she's not pure. Same exact halakha. Right? She's finished counting. She's done the final check. There's no more blood. She's done. She's clean. She doesn't have a mikveh. Until she goes to the
Not
mikveh.
in his scenario, because the guy is still tameh from being. He has the other from Sadat.
That's not my point. My point is that you could be finished with one part of the problem and not finished with another part of the problem.
So what's the answer?
So what's the answer to
What
what?
if there is no mikveh where she lives?
So the halakha is she's now not pure.
She has to go. She has to travel to one.
She has to travel to one.
Her husband has to.
I have a friend who lives in British Columbia. Okay, for years they did not have a mikveh. Part of becoming a rabbi there means that every time your wife has to go to mikveh, she's get on a plane and she'll fly to Toronto, I think. Yeah,
jump in the lake.
I think you know him.
The lake was frozen.
You know what I'm talking about? Shia.
That is true.
Yeah,
Shia for years.
That's rough.
Shia for years. His wife had to go anytime that was part of taking a job in that place. There was no mikveh.
And I thought 77th Street was far.
By the way, you should just know there's an amazing invention that they just made as a guy who built like a plastic, like a mikveh that has parts, like a modular mikveh that you could put together in your backyard.
Yeah, collecting.
I don't know who it is.
You sure it's not called an ice plunge?
The same thing, by the way. I'm thinking the same thing. You put out one of the ice barrel buckets and just collect rain.
So what's it called? So no, because there's different
kind of rain
there's
barrel.
problems with halachically how a mikveh has to be constructed, right? So the guy built a completely halachic kosher mikveh. All you need to do is ship it to wherever. I think it cost $3,000. And I thought to myself, you know what? It's funny. If you had someone to set it up properly, imagine you're on this Pesach program. Last year, my wife, that's a few years, my wife is on the Pesach program. Many women have to go to mikveh. Where do they need to go? Ocean. What a dichit. You have to go to the ocean. You have to wait. It's scary at night. It's not private. This, that. $3,000. You have a mikveh. Put mechitzot all the way around it. You have a regular thing to dip.
Get one room and keep
Simple.
it in one room in the place.
That's much more complicated. Getting it inside, having the water, moving it, drawn, etc.
The hotels were smart. They added it as a spa service. Put a $200
where is it? In Connecticut, they have a mikveh.
$200 off charge.
There's one hotel that has a mikveh. Isn't there one hotel in Connecticut that has a mikveh?
Huh?
Isn't there one hotel in Connecticut that has a mikveh?
Surcharge.
In Connecticut, is
Yes,
there one hotel that
yes.
has a mikveh?
There's a Jewish hotel somewhere that has a mikveh, but it's only because it's a Jewish hotel that's servicing Jews all the time. Most other places, to build and maintain a mikveh is not so simple, right? Because a lot of times, if they're not doing it right, then I'll just give you a simple example. Let's say there's less rainwater. The non-Jewish guy comes into the mikveh, right? He sees they're using some form of water purification. It smells a little bit. And what does he do? Drains the whole thing. Turns on the tap. Isur karet. He dipped in a mikveh. It wasn't a mikveh. The person with his wife nidah. So these things, they're not so simple They needs to be maintained. It needs to be checked. It needs to be clear.
Man's mikveh is much
Much simpler,
right?
yeah. Because the deen for today, by the way, today a man's mikveh is much more simple. Why? In the Beit HaMikdash also, there were scenarios where if a person came to the Beit HaMikdash on the holiday and he was tameh, is hayuv mitah for coming to the Beit HaMikdash impure.
How the mikveh?
So the mikveh
out.
out.
The time of the Beit HaMikdash not as cold as the Arizal mikveh.
By the way,
mikveh.
odds are against you.
You're too young to have been in it cold. It's
cold.
been warm the last 25 years.
I was in it. I couldn't breathe.
Yeah, but that was close to 30. That was 27, 28 years ago. It was cold.
Even now, I went. I was really. Yeah, I couldn't.
Really?
You should just know. I want you to know.
Last year.
I want you to know.
The last few
Have you
times
ever
I
gone?
was
Have you ever gone to the Kotel?
Should have been in it 30
It's
years
very
ago.
cold.
That was ice.
I don't remember. I remember as a child also, but I remember also this time. I couldn't breathe. You know when you dunk, you're supposed to dunk 7 times? So I went under the water. I came up,
Very cold.
and your breath.
Couldn't catch your breath.
You can't use your breath.
Felt like your lungs collapsed.
It felt like your lungs collapsed.
I know.
And then you go in again, and after you do 2 or 3, you're kind of more okay. But I remember thinking, I can't do this.
The first couple, you're in shock.
Every time you dunk. Once I got in, I went blank.
You're out.
I couldn't even think of anything.
You just think I'm so cold.
When I was a teen,
That's why it brings you kapara, by the way, because it's like
wiped you clean.
It's like Control Alt Delete.
The last thing I want to say is outside. And this is actually so beautiful. If you ever went to the Kotel, not from the inside, you ever go with the outside with the buses, where the buses are? So outside the gates and up the hill. If you're walking down that hill, you'll see in the walls of the outer wall, you'll see there's what looks like squares. You ever see them? Like little down, it looks like little cutouts. Those were mikvaot. Where they had wholesale mikvaot all across, because before you walked in, you had to have a mikveh to be able to become pure. So you imagine back in the day, it's so amazing to me. A Zav would come to the Beit HaMikdash, a Nida, whatever, they come, and they could go dip right there, right outside the Beit HaMikdash, and come pure. Bezrat Hashem, speedily in our days, inshallah.